Good morning, everyone. As Niall said, my name is Andy McCormick. I'm the editor at the Knowledge Engineers. 12 Ahead is a big new product of ours, which we've been plugging a bit today, and we'll continue to do so until you take up an offer of the trial. I very much urge you to do so. Anyway, very excited to introduce our next panel today. I think a great part of the job we do with the team at the Knowledge Engineers, 12 Ahead, DKC, which is our training platform, is we go and find the emerging trends by talking to people on the ground, using our trainers in different territories around the world. We find out the emerging trends that are really affecting businesses in terms of threats, but also opportunities to harness those trends and really make a go of them, some of which Niall has just been through. Talking about innovation, I think it's quite easy to be a bit fluffy when talking about innovation. I think today we've really tried to provide some good case studies of what's happening around innovation, and I think we won't be fluffy on this panel. I'm going to introduce my panelists who are very unfluffy. I'm delighted to welcome, I've asked them all to provide evidence of one emerging trend to present. They'll each present that emerging trend, and then we'll sit down and have a chat. And I'd love to get what you guys are seeing on the ground as well, what emerging trends you're seeing, and to have a little discussion about that. That'd be fantastic. Okay, so first speaker is Omid Ashtari. Omid is Business Development Director at Foursquare. And until recently, Omid was at Google, working in San Francisco on Google+, but obviously wasn't a cool enough job for Omid. He's moved to London, which is fantastic for us. He's the first employee for Foursquare in Europe, so he's basically leading the charge. He's hired one person who's an intern who's helping him. But if anyone's looking for a job, I think he's actually very, very much on the case. So I actually urge you to read Omid's blog about leaving Google to go to Foursquare. It's quite entertaining. It must be every geek's dream to have that choice. And I do call Omid a geek because his Twitter handle is called The Cool Geek, so I'm not being insulting. So if you do want to follow him, he's The Cool Geek. Okay, I'm going to ask Omid to come up and present now. Omid has chosen the emerging trend of hyper-relevance, and particularly talking about contextual experiences around location. So I'd like to welcome Omid onto the stage.
I'm a bit shorter, so I'm going to try to move this. Can everybody hear me in the back? Yeah. Perfect. I have a bit of a sore throat, so that's why I'm wearing this very fashionable scarf. I hope you apologize. And I saw a trend emerging here, and I think it's really exciting. It's always the first couple of rows are empty. Somebody has to explain this to me. Since we were all in school, people always leave the first row empty for some reason. Anyway, let's get to this more interesting trend of the rise of contextual experiences. So thanks for the intro, Andy. I put these slides together because we've been thinking about this a lot at Foursquare. And this is, if you bear with me, a little bit of a, let's say, look into the future as well. We're scratching the surface, as Niall was saying, of these hyper-local and contextual experiences today, but there will be a lot more exciting and a lot more embedded in our everyday life going forward. So I'll read this out first, or we'll look at this for a second, and then I'll elaborate a little bit. So consumers adopt services that give them simplicity, right? If you have something that takes hassle out of your life, you'll love it and you'll adopt it. And especially if it gives you contextual experience, because it's kind of a magic moment where machines somehow understand what you actually want to express before you even express it. So as at Google, we really talked about that magic moment and how all our products wanted to kind of invoke this magic moment in people's lives. And the sophistication of these experiences will only get better and better with the development of the mobile technology and with technology in general, but very much centered around mobile. Why mobile? Because you have this device that is going to be on you at all times, and I don't have to explain this too much to you, but it's going to become the hub of computing around you. And you might have a bracelet that is measuring your heartbeat and the temperature of your skin. The Up band in the US, developed by Jawbone, already does this, measure how many steps you take on a daily basis, and that might communicate with your mobile phone, as well as a sensor in your shoes and a sensor in your clothes. And all these things will feed back to this computer that is in your pocket called your phone. So let me just show you a little geeky equation I put up there. So How is this driven? Well, it's driven mainly through social media in the very first instance, and I think the start of it is really us exposing a lot more of our lives on social media networks like Facebook, like Twitter, like Foursquare. Apologize. And we share things. I think initially everybody was a bit resistant when it came to really exposing their lives on Facebook. I remember some of my friends saying, "Oh, I don't want to put my picture up on a site and talk about this and that." But we all caved in eventually. And if you think about it, the credit card initially, when it was introduced, had raised similar privacy concerns. And now my credit card company knows line item by line item of everything that I'm buying, whether it's online or offline. And yes, they're regulated, but we eventually said, yes, this is a utility that I want to take advantage of, so I'm going to say yes to it. Same with the mobile phone. Initially, I remember I was, I think, 18 when I got my first mobile phone. It was the Nokia 6110, if somebody still remembers that one. Nice little clunky thing with an antenna. But the people were like, I don't know if I want to have a phone with me all the time. And then the mobile phone operator knows where I am at all time. But we're completely accepting that as second nature right now. And a mobile phone operator knows where we are at all times. And nobody's concerned about that anymore. Yes, they're regulated, but still we gave up that privacy. And we gave it up because we got a lot of value in return for it. And you'll see this happening with social media and social media platforms moving away from vanity platforms to more utility platforms, right? Facebook was not embraced by the mainstream when it was all about sharing what you had for breakfast. But when all of a sudden so many friends were on there that it became a communication platform, a platform where I can stay in touch with my cousins across the pond and they're showing me while they're going through high school their pictures and their sophomore year prom, etc. That became a utility for me and an interesting platform to engage on. The other thing that we'll see, and this is really at the beginning, we're at the beginning of the journey here, are sensors, and sensors becoming a lot more prolific. The huge difference between sharing and sensors, by the way, is that sharing is always explicit, and sensors, once you opt in once, they will keep on tracking your information. You might not share them at all times with any provider, but once you opt in for that sensor to be turned on, it will record all your information at all times. And if you once authenticate that information with a service, that service will be running. And I think Niall gave us a great example where he opted into Google Attitude once, even forget about it. And this service was recording all his whereabouts, right? And 3 months later, Google, as a nice company as they are, reminded him that we're actually tracking a lot of information about you. You might want to take a look at it. And he goes back and discovers this treasure trove of information about himself. And the sensors that we're seeing right now might be accelerometers, GPS, etc. But you'll see, and this is no future, nothing that I made up or some futurist kind of dream. But people are thinking about putting chemical sensors into phones already. You could then measure odors or measure if food is still good or not. And Nokia was talking about this in a design study that they did, and they were at least saying that they will get it out by 2015. I don't know if it's going to be Nokia, but it might be some other mobile phone manufacturer that is thinking about that. And the applications of that might be really interesting. So you could measure if a food is still good and if you want to buy that, and if it's not that good anymore, you might get a discount on it, etc. So I'll get into some examples a little bit later. So this data sharing and the sensors all together is obviously really interesting. How can companies really access this information? Well, through APIs, right? Facebook has an API, and I think signing into a website. Who has signed into a website with using Facebook login? So I see a couple, and I think that's an example for simplicity, right? For us adopting something simple, but obviously that also makes the website know a little bit more about us than we might be aware of, because it's all driven by Facebook's terms and conditions for the Open Graph, right? So they share information about our interests, maybe, and maybe in the future they might share even more about our interests that they have collected on Facebook to these websites. But these APIs are really powerful tools for any brand to really tie in and get information that people are sharing on social media networks. The other thing is, who's installed an app and has really read the permissions that the app needs to use on your phone? Yeah, I thought so. Who knows of these permissions? everybody knows that their permissions. Yeah. So anytime you install an app, it asks you, yeah, I need to plug into your address book. I want to see if your phone is actually, if you're on a call or not. Some apps, I remember one that launched in the US, it was called Color, was actually listening to what was happening around you while this app was active, right? So it could pick up sounds. If you're at a concert, it would figure out at what concert you're at because of the music that was playing in the background, for instance, if it had multiple people that were using the app there. So these are really powerful tools where companies can gather this information and through APIs maybe plug into it and use it for interesting applications. And then add to this a layer of intelligence, right? Because the data itself is not that useful, but if you add a layer of intelligence to it, like in Niall's example, if he's spending that much time in one spot when it's working hours, then it's probably his workplace, right? And if he's spending that much time in a place on a weekend, then that's probably his home, right? So this is a level of intelligence applied to that data, which then leads to real context, right? So that way you understand, okay, this person is currently doing this, and maybe we can target them based on that. I'll give you a couple of examples too about what we've done with Foursquare related to this trend. So who knows about Foursquare, first of all? I like that. Who's used who has the app installed on their phone? Okay. Who's used it in the last 4 weeks? Okay, great. So Foursquare allows you to check into places, as you might know. But I think what you'll see from us and what you'll see in general with this local trend is that we're going to move into an era of passive becoming a passive app. And we're not talking about passive tracking people if they don't opt into it, but I think people will understand that in the future, really, if they want to take advantage of the valuable things that hyperlocation or hyperlocal platforms can offer them, they will opt into being for services to listen to their location, I like to call it. We have a function called Radar. And with this function, we listen to the iPhone feed of location data that it's gathering at all times, right? The iPhone is gathering that data. If you opt in, Foursquare can actually listen to that. We don't record it, we don't save it, we don't broadcast it, but we listen to it. And what does that help us to do? So this is the example of the UK History Channel. The UK History Channel has left tips at really interesting places around the UK, historical places. And the information that I'm sharing with Foursquare in the first instance is I like the History Channel. And the second thing I do is opt in, and then I'm essentially opting into the sensors tracking my whereabouts. Now, the scenario is the following. You like the History Channel. We know where you are. You walk by the Big Ben. And we can then ping your phone and tell you, hey, you know what? The History Channel has left a tip nearby. You might want to go and check it out. And all of a sudden, you're walking around the city, and you're not thinking about Foursquare or the History Channel, but the History Channel gains mind share in your life, right? In a situation where you might have just been in a restaurant that is nearby Big Ben. And they should have no mind share there whatsoever. But because they're working with Foursquare and they use this really interesting way to leave a tip at a location that is highly relevant, this becomes so much more interesting information for you. You might read it if it's on their website, a history of Big Ben, if you're really interested. But if you're in the location that is nearby and they're pushing this information to you, and it makes it so much more relevant to you and so much more contextually interesting, right? And they have more they might have more Foursquare followers than Twitter followers, actually, because they did such a great job at pushing this type of information to users. The last example I want to leave you with is we did this partnership with Vons, which is a subsidiary of Safeways in the US. Vons is a chain of supermarkets in Southern California, and Pepsi. And the way this works is you authenticate your Foursquare account with your Safeway account or Vons account. Now, what does this authentication mean? It means that you, as a user, and we believe that it's your data, so you can share it with whoever you want, opt in to sharing your check-in history and any future check-in with Safeway in that instance, right? And Safeway has a partnership with Pepsi. So every time you check in to Safeway, the Safeway app becomes active, and it pushes a coupon to you based on your check-in history and your future check-ins. Let me give you an example. So you've been to the gym in the last 30 days, 10 times in the last 30 days. If you check into Safeway, you'll actually get a coupon for Pepsi drink that is a sports drink rather than a fizzy drink, right? Or for instance, if you wake up early every morning and check into the tube or into the subway very early, then we kind of gather that you're probably an active morning person. And if you check into Safeway, then they give you a coupon for Quaker, which is one of their brands, is oatmeal. So you get discounts on that. You can obviously see the application of this type of data really helping to target and give people a lot more contextual, relevant offers, right? And it was a hugely successful campaign, which we're replicating a lot with a lot of other players as well. So these are two examples that are scratching the surface. I think we're at the very beginning of what is going to be the brave new world of data sharing and sensors tracking a lot of information about us. I think at the moment this sounds very creepy, but so did it when people were thinking about giving their data, their line item and purchasing data away to credit cards or to use a mobile phone that is tracking your whereabouts at all times. It's the tipping point is when the value on the platform is so high that not doing it would be actually disabling, so to say, compared to other people. And I think we're going to be at a tipping point very soon. Thanks.